quickly.
Okay.
And you can see the ultra-fine powder that this is. Typical glucosamine and chondroitin are glucosamine hydrochloride, which glucosamine hydrochloride in the hydrochloride group, that's an acidic group. Most of us aren't looking to put things that are more acidic in our stomach also. It's a form of glucosamine that the science doesn't support its use. I constantly go through the science and the reviews and the charts. The only reason glucosamine hydrochloride is used is because it's cheaper. Not because it's better, because it's cheaper. What's really disturbing to me is that we as human beings, we can make intelligent decisions, and once we find out, we make sure we're getting glucosamine sulfate. You don't have to get it from me. There are other companies that are reliable and will use glucosamine sulfate and chondroitin sulfate. Probably not as good as my formula, but at least there are other options. What's surprising to me, as we're getting close to introducing our first pet product, and our first pet product will have glucosamine, chondroitin, collagen peptides. It'll be a comprehensive joint product for our favorite people in our world, our furry people in our world.
Nice.
But almost every one of the pet products I look at uses glucosamine hydrochloride, which is just so disconcerting because some people, they might cut corners for themselves, but they don't want to cut corners for their dog or for their cat. So really disconcerting. So it's just something that, again,
and why do they do that then?
Excuse me?
And why do they do that?
Because it's cheaper. Glucosamine hydrochloride is dramatically less expensive than glucosamine sulfate, but glucosamine hydrochloride is dramatically less researched. The science says if you were making your own glucosamine sulfate product, you would only use glucosamine sulfate. It's not like you'd kind of convince yourself that maybe hydrochloride is better for this reason or that reason. Only reason it's better is it's cheap. That's the only reason it's used. And I could go through the charts here. First, I'll just give you a little background on glucosamine and chondroitin, just to give you a sense of how much coverage it's gotten, both in terms of research papers, so more than 19,500 papers, more than 17,000 papers on chondroitin, more than 1,200 papers on both used together, and then over 2,600 clinical trials and meta-analyses, systematic reviews. Most drugs that get to market maybe have a couple of dozen trials, maybe have a couple of dozen trials. So it's been the subject of an abundant amount of research, and the quotes I have here from medical journals for doctors tell doctors to tell their patients they have to get the sulfate form. This is not me saying it, they have to get the sulfate form. And me, if the science said get hydrochloride, you can bet that's what would be here. But the science clearly and unequivocally calls for, it doesn't call for, it screams out for the sulfate form, and that's what we use.
Do you think people just don't know that, and that's why when they buy the product, they're just not? Well,
they assume, and fairly so, that if they're getting glucosamine, it's the proper form.
Right.
And then typically on the front of the label, it says glucosamine. It says, so you figure, and you're entitled to assume it's the correct form until you turn the label around and you look at the fine print on the back of the label, and instead of what mine says, which you look at the back of the label and it tells you that it has potassium glucosamine sulfate. We even declare the mineral because they all have a mineral salt, and our other is calcium chondroitin sulfate because the typical chondroitin is a sodium salt. Most people want less sodium. I don't have high blood pressure, but I want less sodium. I don't need to get sodium in my joint product. So we both use the sulfate form and we use the mineral forms that are the most desirable forms. Of course, they're more expensive, but our pricing is exceedingly reasonable despite the quality.
Excellent. I know we have to move along here. We are only 10 minutes to midnight in our today's special, so we have a couple more things we'd like to squeeze in for you. Continue to choose this. You'll be so glad that you did, especially if you were dealing with joint issues.
It's 4 capsules a day. I know some people take 2 capsules a day because they'll take collagen peptides or things like that. But the best science, the best research and clinical studies are on 4 capsules a day.
That's good to know. Okay, next up we have turmeric. Turmeric is another one that has rapidly become a favorite